Well, eventually we're on air and we've heard from the politicians tonight, but now it is your turn. We're live and we want to hear from you on More Politics, your call.
Was Decathlon right to bow to public pressure? The French sportswear company decided to can the decision to sell the running hijab after huge public outcry. Even the government intervened, saying it went against French values. But is this just the latest in an argument in France over what Muslim women wear?
Really controversial one, that one. We want to hear from you. Please do get on touch. Also, do you fear for your job security? That's also what we're asking you tonight. We know that actually employment is at a record high, at least for this century, across Europe, but many of those jobs are temporary jobs.
Scratch the surface, and they're not what we hope they will be.
Possibly not, and maybe it is one of the reasons for the rise in populism, this sense of insecurity. How do you feel?
Now, should the EU consider doing business with North Korea? Donald Trump has encouraged Kim Jong-un to open up his country to trade and investment. But of course, the people of North Korea are suffering under an obscene dictator. But should the EU decide to maybe do some trade with North Korea and maybe bring him over to our side? We want to hear from you.
Yeah, extraordinary pictures coming out of Vietnam today. You know what to do. You know how to get in touch. Pick up the phone. It's free. You've got no excuse not to. Our number is 00800 333 3700. Particularly keen if you live on France and this issue of the hijab. Our team standing by to take your calls here in the basement of the European Parliament. If nothing else, you get a chance to speak to them, I suppose. You can also email us on rawpoll@euronews.com, or you can find us on Twitter and Facebook. Use the hashtag #RawPolitics.
Or you get a chance to speak to our two great guests, Morten Lockhart, a Danish MEP with the ALDE Group, and of course one of the favourites, Brian Maguire, joining us.
One of our favourites indeed. But first, let's cross over to Euronews' headquarters and to Lyon for the very latest news this hour.
Darren, thank you very much. Our top stories. British MPs will get the chance to vote on up to 5 amendments that could steer Theresa May's Brexit strategy ahead of more negotiations with the EU. Tonight's amendment decisions come on the heels of a dramatic U-turn yesterday, where the Prime Minister promised MPs a vote on whether or not to delay Brexit or to rule out a no deal. The amendments are tied to a motion filed by Theresa May's government acknowledging the Prime Minister's ongoing Brexit talks with the European Union. The US President Donald Trump has hailed North Korea's Kim Jong-un as a great leader as the two men kicked off a summit in Hanoi. Both expressed optimism the meeting will lead to a deal on the totalitarian state's nuclear weapons. The two-day get-together is following up on the leaders' initial historic meeting in Singapore in June last year. And the former Spanish Prime Minister, Mariano Rajoy, has accused Catalan separatist leaders of wanting to liquidate national sovereignty by organising a banned referendum. Mr. Rajoy today testified at Madrid's Supreme Court in the trial of 12 separatist leaders and activists for their failed independence bid in 2017. Well, those are our top stories. Now back to Darren and Shona in Brussels.
Janat, thank you very much indeed. A full news bulletin coming up here on Euronews at the top of the hour. Extraordinary stuff, isn't it, when you look at those images from Vietnam of Donald Trump and Kim Jong-un. Only 2 years ago, he was calling him Rocket Man. It was all about fire and fury.
Suicide mission he was claiming he was on.
It's extraordinary. And all this while at the same time in the US Congress, Michael Cohen is calling Trump a racist, a conman and a cheat. One cannot say the politics under Donald Trump's presidency is anything. It is anything but dull. Saying that, we want to get your views on whether the EU, whether us here in Europe, should do business with North Korea. The one we're focusing on tonight, though, is this question about the French sportswear company, Decathlon, whether they were right to bow to public pressure in essentially cancelling plans to sell the hijab for women in France. Really interesting this. We are running a poll tonight, and at the moment it's actually pretty split, with 48% saying it was right to bow to pressure, 52% say no, neck and neck.
48-52, where have we heard that before?
We've heard that before.
But let's be clear what the hijab is, of course. The hijab is the headscarf. The niqab is the full face covering that Muslim women, some Muslim women choose to wear. Very few of them in France, actually. I think about 200 or something like that, even though there was such a furore over the French banning them in the public sector environment. But the hijab covers a woman's hair, and the running hijab just covers her body, essentially. And I suppose it gives some women who want to be modest a possibility to engage in sportsmanship and the community. But Morten Lukkegaard, you're from Denmark, and Denmark has something similar in terms of its position against Muslim dress. Just explain it to us.
Well, I don't know if it's the same thing, actually, but what we have the similar debates, I guess most European countries had. And what we found out as a pragmatic solution, I would say, a piece of legislation saying that we ban masks in the public space. We don't like people who are masked at demonstrations, trying to cover up their identity. So this has been banned, but not for religious reasons. And this is, of course, extremely important also for us as liberals. We don't do that in Denmark. We don't have tradition. It's against our fundamental issue.
But when you say it's not against religious reasons, you just said you have the same debate. So is this banning of the niqab a way of shoehorning, the issue, to making it sound like it's an excuse? Security is the excuse, but in reality, we don't want to see overtly Muslim women around Denmark, or we want to at least...
I wouldn't use the word shoehorning, but I do understand your point, and of course there's an element of trying to be pragmatic here, because what we are facing in Denmark is a very, very delicate discussion as well, and I think that at least, my party is in government right now, and we had a very, very heated internal debate about this, and what we found out was that of course we couldn't, as liberals, support banning these things for religious reasons. We could never do that. So on the other hand, there was some public pressure,
because it would be discriminatory against one particular religion, huh?
Yeah, we couldn't do that. On the other hand, there was support of trying to avoid these demonstrators wearing masks, because they are very popular. Also in Denmark, we've seen that in France and other places. People demonstrably, wearing these masks in order to avoid the police.
Let's hold on a second. People have worn masks for decades.
Yeah.
And these bans have only come in, or a discussion at least, in recent years, or the last 10 or 20 years, and that is clearly because of a backlash against Islam. Let me put it this way. Of course, it would be a lie to say that it has not been influential in this discussion. It has, of course. That goes without saying. On the other hand, I think that this solution that we actually choose, at least seen from my point of view personally, is a very good solution, because I never fancied these demonstrators anyway. I think we needed this ban. Yeah. Okay. Well, just to remind you, particularly if you live in France, and if you're a woman and you wear the hijab, we want to know how you feel about this. Or indeed you're a French national who thinks that the outcry about this and what Decathlon done is the right thing. Please do pick up the phone. We want to hear from you. The number is free. It's 00800 333 3700.
And we do have one call. We've got Catherine from Dublin. Catherine, was Decathlon right to give in to public pressure to not sell its running hijab?
Pardon, could you just say that again?
What's your position on the hijab, Catherine? Decathlon, the French company, decided not to sell a running hijab because some people say it was against French values. What's your position?
I think this is wrong. I think that we have to respect where people come from and what they believe in. And this is part of a whole cultural thing. I mean, people here go to church and they wear hats and they wear scarves and they cover their head in the old traditions. So why can they not wear the hijab? Who's to say they can't? I think it's absolutely terrible. They're supposed to be... I don't see it as a way of keeping women enslaved. I think it's a cultural and respect for that culture, and that's what they believe. And I believe that we should support that.
But you said that people should be allowed to wear it in France, and that's fine. But what do you say to, particularly to, let's say, migrant people who've come to France, who've come to live in France, and many French people, including clearly the government, feel that they should abide by not just French rules, but a French way of doing things, and that is not expressing religion and religious paraphernalia in public? Surely they should. Surely, essentially, they should adhere to French rules.
No, absolutely not.
But this is a kind of radical secularism, where it's a kind of ideal for society where things are fairly neutral, gone too far. And the idea that secularism in itself is neutral is wrong. This is a quasi-religious mentality to begin with. And we don't say anything against nuns, Catholic nuns, who go down the street wearing a veil which is almost identical to the hijab
Same
as well.
Jews,
Exactly, to Jewish women as well, almost exactly the same thing. This is fundamentally focused on Muslim women. This is a form of racism. And the idea that a company the size of Decathlon should give in after 500 people complaining is ridiculous. They should have stood their ground in this.
So, Catherine, why do you think they have done this? Where do you think this outcry is coming from?
I think people are afraid. They feel threatened, and they don't understand what's happening. And I think the thing is that if we go back over time and we look at all the people who've been migrants, including the people that left Ireland, we've all taken part of our culture and heritage with us and changed the place. And I think right now people are not open anymore to allowing new people in and allowing them to make change.
Catherine, really interesting stuff. Thank you very much for calling in. Catherine there from Dublin. But I must remind you that our poll tonight, and clearly a lot of people in France disagree with that point of view. And that's the interesting thing, though, isn't it? That despite potentially 90% of people here feeling that it is unnecessary, the public are concerned about this. And we can't get away from there is Islamophobia out there.
But why? But this is why Decathlon should have taken a stand. They should have pushed back. And government ministers in France who are sympathetic towards Decathlon's position are showing a great weakness. They're allowing a fundamentalism, a radical secularism to get hold of France, which is more damaging in the long term. The right approach to this is education.
Morten Lukkegaard, you said that this is a debate in France, and you were talking about the banning of face veils for security purposes. But the hijab does not cover a person's face, and that's the problem here. It's actually a very neutral piece of cloth that people are misinterpreting based on their Islamophobia.
And basically, I would totally agree with what you just said, Ryan. I mean, this goes far beyond what's reasonable, and it shows weakness, basically culturally weakness, in my point of view. But I think we miss one element here. This is a private company, as I understand it, and of course, the private company is allowed to do whatever it will. I mean, I see no reason to interfere in their decision as such. What interests me is what's going on publicly, what authorities, what the Danish authorities, the French authorities are putting out. And I think this is a very important difference in this discussion. And what private companies are doing, I mean, basically I have no reason to go into this.
If it's not against the law, then that's maybe the question. Tweets coming in on this, current affairs, that's the Twitter handle, saying this debate in France show how racist, intolerant France is. Nobody is opposing the hijab on women. Women can buy if they like or wish. So how is this morally wrong? Women always decide what women wear. Disgusting. And another one actually saying, I'm a Muslim English woman who wears the hijab. I wanted to go to study in France, but I'm not going to go anymore. I don't want to go to a country where what I wear is a problem for a lot of people. Very divisive topic. We're going to be carrying on this discussion after the break.
And we've got two more of the subjects for you, of course. Do you fear for your job security? Because the European Commission said today that unemployment is the lowest this century, but many of those contracts are temporary contracts, which doesn't provide great security. And of course, should the EU consider doing trade with North Korea? We want to hear from you.
Join us after the break. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Your call, talking about a whole range of stuff tonight, whether the EU should be doing business with North Korea, following in Donald Trump's footsteps, essentially, with dealing with Kim Jong-un, even though, of course, North Korea's got an horrific human rights record, and many would say also an entirely unreliable partner to be dealing with. But, you know, one could also argue, and I would, that actually opening up these societies and dialogue can make things move. Also, are you concerned about your job? Do you fear for your job security? We're talking about temporary contracts, which seems to be on the rise. Even though employment is, just how secure are those those jobs. And also, of course, this big question about the hijab and Decathlon in France, whether it was right to bow to public pressure, essentially to stop selling it for a sportswear company when women go running. And at the moment, public opinion on our poll seems divided, but certainly a caller just before the break thought it was pretty outrageous.
And of course, the hijab is what they were going to sell. Decathlon was a running hijab which covered the woman's body and just her head as well, but not her face.
And is on sale in North Africa, has been on sale in Morocco.
And you could concoct your own one if you just wanted to.
And I'm pretty sure in Britain it's on sale as well.
And in a winter, during the winter, in November, December, if you're going for a run, you might want to cover your body and your head.
We might all wear one. Anyway,
but anyway,
we've got people tweeting in.
Mixed opinion, actually. Bal Fanesca said, I find it fascinating how much women defend the usage of the hijab. This was a male creation. I don't like it, and I don't want my daughter ever to wear one. No woman should have to walk around hiding who she is. I agree with the French. And then another one, how ironic, French extremists want to ban a woman's choice of clothing because they say it limits their choices. Yes, there is a bit of hypocrisy in it. There's another bit of hypocrisy in the fact that a lot of, around this debate, you find that a lot of people say that Muslim women don't engage properly in France. They're not engaged in the Republic. And here they are, these women trying to do some running, some sportswear, some sportsmanship, and they're prevented from doing so simply because they want to look modest. What do you think, Brian?
Yeah, I think the hypocrisy element here stinks. And Molière had a nice quote about this as well. He said this is the kind of vice which the French love as well. So it's the idea that you can advocate for women's rights, that you can say women have to have the right to choose on a whole range of other issues, and then say that headscarf thing, no, you can't have the right to choose about that as well. This is utter hypocrisy and something which is medieval in its own thinking, and yet they criticize Islamic teachings for being medieval. This is wrong today.
Right, let's bring in Mohammed, who is from Manchester and is on the phone. Good evening, Mohammed. What is your sense of this? Do you think Decathlon were right or wrong?
Good evening, Dennis, and good evening, everybody on the panel tonight. It's totally, absolutely outrageous, but this is a personal view. I'm a young man in his 40s from the UK, born and bred in Manchester, and I think this is nothing but absolutely disgusting, where people are judgmental of somebody, or a woman, or a male, it doesn't matter if it's male or female, but tonight it's about the hijab, to be judgmental of a person that's wearing a headgear, as far as I'm concerned.
Do you think, though, it's based in anti-Muslim sentiments?
Sorry, can you repeat that question again?
Do you think one of the reason behind this is essentially an anti-Muslim agenda?
I wouldn't say it's an anti-Muslim agenda, but I just think it personally it's just a mindset. I live in the UK. We don't have this issue in the UK. I think with the Brexit, the European one world model, one community, no borders, it's not working for the French nation itself. It's an issue for the French nation. It's nothing but an individual mindset. But I also have an opinion that every country has got to make its own mind up. And good luck to the French.
But
it's not obviously working for them.
That is a point, though, isn't it, Morton, that actually the French have always been obsessed by what people wear. They are. You go to a swimming pool in France, and they've got massive signs saying you have to wear Speedos, essentially, or indeed other very scantily clad kind of pieces of swimwear. The French do have a thing about clothing.
Yeah,
or the absence of it.
Or the absence of it.
Basically, I think you're right. I mean, it's a joke, of course, but there's a sense of seriousness in what you're saying, because if you look at the French, the first thing, when I heard about this thing years ago about the ban they chose, I mean, they said, this is so typical French, because they have a thing about culture involving food, clothes, all these things. So I think more than the rest of us, they have this feeling of being French in a certain way is the right way to do things, and if you do not do it, you're not French as at all. And I think this is, of course, this is to generalize, I know, but there is a certain French thing to this. I think it's not. I think it's very deliberately done by the French.
Can we just ask, is Mohammed still on the line? Mohammed, are you there?
I am, Dennis. Yeah. I am, Dennis. I'm on the line.
Mohammed, just on this point, why do you think it's not an issue in Britain? Why do you think...
I'll tell you why it's not an issue. I'm going to give you a fine example. I'm a normal, ordinary, middle-class, hard-working man in his 40s with 2 children, a commoner, right? And my son is in the cadets because he's going to be a soldier for the British Army. And I'm a Muslim lad, born and bred in the UK. We don't have discrimination. To me, it's nothing but discrimination. I couldn't care less, and I would not be offended what somebody wore.
I wonder whether Karl Lagerfeld had brought out a Chanel version of this, if the French would find that more acceptable, and whether there's an element of...
Maybe Gucci or Armani, or I don't know.
Exactly, yeah.
Is there a more serious...
Good luck to everybody. It just saddens me that it's 2019 and we're talking and making discussions of somebody wearing a hijab or a turban, unfortunately, you know, or a white hat that's coming out of a mosque. Are we that inferior within ourselves?
Mohammed, thank you very much for that, and it's a really, really interesting point, because isn't the point that actually maybe the UK has been better at integrating its Muslim population than the French have?
Oh, that's a difficult question. I was going to say before you asked me that discrimination is taking place everywhere. In Denmark, of course, also in Great Britain. We see it all over the place all the time. But it's different areas.
Yeah, but we've not seen in the UK, to be fair to the UK, we have not seen kind of the mass riots, the sense of separation. No, based on Islam. That we have seen in France.
Well, you do have the rise in Islamophobia since Brexit as well. It's a different type of secularism. And with this, I suppose we were talking about this being, a very particular French form of secularism, laïcité. But I suppose the other question is, since the French have been having this debate since, I guess, the 80s.
1780s.
Yeah, well, actually, exactly. When they decided to start laïcité was the early 1900s. Anyway. Like other countries have had this debate in Belgium and in other many other countries. You said you have it in Denmark. So do you think that the implications could be that this would spread and that you have this intolerance across Europe, and it comes in the form of telling a woman she's not oppressed? We don't want you to wear the hijab or the niqab because otherwise you're oppressed, or else you're too Islamic. But in actual fact, it is discriminatory. Yeah,
but I think there are many layers to this debate, and of course to have this whole discussion about this. Discrimination, but I would make the point, as you did, there's some inspiration here for I mean, when we had the debate in France and in Belgium, and when this turned up in Denmark, we were inspired. Of course, the same forces in Denmark. The right-wing forces were inspired by things going on in Belgium and France. And the new thing here is that because of the technology, because of the easy way you can Google everything in a minute, all political forces, also the right-wing forces, surely had made it much easier for them to take up the same kind of arguments, take up the same kind of discrimination. Yeah,
because it gives a focal point to racist
and you're seeing this all over Europe right now.
It's an easy thing to identify.
Under the pretense of not oppressing women, often.
I don't think they care even about.
Well, at least they say, the niqab oppresses women, therefore we don't want this, which is patriarchal in itself.
Well, it's interesting. Someone's just tweeted in saying this was a bad decision. The Jewish, Christian, and Islamic female headgear are products of religious male patriarchy and represent Stone Age gender apartheid. But a store removing the item from the shelves only adds fuel to the fire and makes France look idiotic. Interesting point there.
Any French people who have...
Well, yeah, but again, we do want to hear from French people. Please do call us in. The numbers are on the screen, or tweet us using the hashtag #RawPolitics. But I think we've got Peter from Poole on the southern coast of England on the phone. Is that Peter? Good evening.
Yes, it is. Hi.
How are you? What do you think of all of this?
Fine, thank you. My view on the hijab is basically we're allowing men in liberal societies in the West, we're allowing Muslim men to oppress women. And I am sure that a lot of women who say they like the hijab they're basically being brainwashed to like it. It's
I'm sorry,
not a
but I have
religious
Muslim
thing.
friends who are highly educated women who choose to wear Islamic garments out of their own choice, out of an understanding of their own religion. I don't agree with what they do, but I understand with clarity that they choose to do this of their own will, not because their husbands or their family members tell them to, but because they think it's the right thing to do, and not in all circumstances either. Some situations they do, and in others they don't.
Peter?
How do you know that this is free will and not upbringing, brainwashing?
But couldn't one say that about anything
Exactly.
that a woman wears, Peter?
Of course you can.
But we don't ban that.
I mean, we prevent sexual mutilation in the West, so why not prevent the hijab?
I think that's a long distance there. Female genital mutilation, it was something that's imposed on a young child. A hijab is a decision a woman takes to wear to display that she's a Muslim. That's this piece of cloth covering her head like a scarf. It's not comparable.
I have actually lived in a Muslim country where women do not wear the hijab, like Egypt, for instance.
What about
And
the
you can
nuns?
see
What about Christian or Catholic nuns or other nuns? Do you think that they're being brainwashed as well?
Of course they are.
But do you not think that they have the right to choose to wear it or not?
Well, when we come to talk about Western women, they are not brainwashed by their families.
My Muslim friends are Western women who are also Muslim.
But the point is, even if you think they are, and lots of people have got very strange ideas about the world and very diverse views about the world, is it the responsibility of the state to tell people what they can and cannot wear?
Well, it's to do with integrating these people to the Western culture. Just before, you talked about the UK being the most liberal of the Western countries in respect to accepting other people's culture. Are you aware of a survey that appeared yesterday on television that 66% of the young people in the UK think that the UK is a racist country?
It's an interesting point, but I come back to this. Do you think the government should tell people what they can and cannot wear?
Well, they do anyway.
Yeah.
Oh, don't tell me. We've lost Peter, and that was just getting interesting. It is a point here, though, that, and actually made by this tweet, that when you get back to it, it's the same with Catholic nuns. I mean, this was an attempt back in the day, and it may still be in some countries around the world. There is patriarchy, and there is a sense of keeping women modest, and that is a thought process behind often this headgear. Even if it's a free choice today, the reason that it's happening is because of really bad gender politics not that long ago.
Well, perhaps, to some degree. But I'll speak only from the Christian perspective, and that there are elements within the Bible which people would say are inspired by God. Some that would come from the Old Testament which say they're not applicable today. Some from the New Testament which they say women should cover their head, but which is not practiced because it's seen as an option, as an observance as well. So that we can't have a linear view to this. And certainly, like you say, should government be involved in that? No, government should not be involved in that. Do we think that people who believe and have faith are brainwashed? No, many people make an absolute choice at different stages of their life. We should respect that.
Morton.
I think just coming back to our first point, the distinction between private and public. I think it's extremely important because in Denmark you can't be a judge, you can't have a public office if you're a woman and you're dressed like this. You can't do it.
Are you talking about the hijab, just to be clear, or the niqab, fully face covering, or just the head covering?
We're talking face covering, just to be clear on that.
Yeah.
But in principle, it's the same discussion. I think it's a matter of can you wear this clothes and take public office and have these positions. You cannot in Denmark, and that's not for religious reasons. And that I think we have to make this point every time we discuss this. It's a matter of what can the public expect when you're entering into an office in Denmark? Can you expect a woman with a covered face? No, you cannot.
But
The
point is, you might make that case, but for lots of people it is. it is based on religion and a dislike of Islam.
No, yeah.
I mean, it
maybe.
is. I mean, we can't. I mean, it is. It is.
Yeah, but in Denmark, I think it's actually this is not a debate in Denmark. I mean, almost every Dane would accept that women cannot wear these things in public offices.
Then the result is quite disproportionate, because then you have fewer women. Actually, you've got no women who wear the niqab or who are devout Muslims in the public sector environment, because they're simply not allowed. They won't go to certain jobs as judges, as police officers, as teachers, because they can't wear the clothing. And then you don't have a proper mixed culture. Then,
guys, we're going to go.
No,
we're going to go.
But maybe that's where the public, the cultural issue, comes into the discussion in the right way. I would say that if we want people to integrate, if we want people from other cultures to integrate in the Danish society, I think to some extent it's about public life. It's what they're doing in private, what they're doing for religious reasons. We should not interfere, and that's, I think, it's a basic principle.
It's fascinating. Gable using Facebook to get in touch, saying that women, yes, do have the right to wear it. An interesting discussion that we are going to continue after the break. Again, particularly if you wear the hijab, please do get in touch. We've had a range of views on this. We'll be carrying on the discussion about whether Decathlon was right to bow to public pressure in France or not.
And of course, two other subjects. Do you fear for your job security? The European Commission said today that we have the lowest unemployment rate this century. But a lot of those jobs, when you scratch the surface, are temporary, not doing really good for job security. And of course, should the EU start doing trade with North Korea? We want to hear from you.
We're going to definitely do those two after the break. Join us in a couple of minutes. Welcome back to Raw Politics. Your call. Donald Trump tweeting tonight saying, great meetings and dinner in Vietnam with Kim Jong-un, North Korea. Very good dialogue. Resuming tomorrow. Almost losing my voice there. I mean, it's extraordinary looking at those pictures, but at the same time, quite extraordinary when you put it kind of almost with juxtaposition to Michael Cohen, his former lawyer, calling him a racist, a conman, and a cheat. Thousands of miles away in the US Congress. Hopefully we will get on to talk about North Korea in a second or two, but this debate on the hijab...
Especially if you're North Korean and living in Europe, we definitely want to hear from you.
Well, we are on Facebook. We are on Facebook, so all views welcome here. But let's come back to this idea of the hijab, because that's what people are talking about tonight. Brian.
Yes.
You say you've got Muslim friends who
some of his best friends are Muslim.
Indeed, who do view this as a you know, as an act of free will. What's their opinion of France? Because there are 6 million Muslims in France, and yet repeatedly, almost in a cycle every couple of years, this story comes up, whether it's about you know, the burqa, bikinis, you know, it just keeps coming up and up again. That's creating quite a hostile environment, isn't it?
Yeah, I'd say the media is responsible for this a lot. I was on TV.
Not us, by the way.
Not Euronews. But 3 years ago, when they had this beach bikini issue as well in the south of France. And I was there at the beach. It was a global exercise in fundamentalism, and yet it was a tiny, tiny incident. There was virtually nothing took place. And this is what's happening in France, is that it's good for newspaper headlines. It's driven by the far right generally, and the Muslim women that I know, they don't like going to America because they get pulled out of the and screened every single time they go. France would be just behind that. So they'd be much more comfortable going to Britain than to America.
These are from where?
From different places, from the UK, from Jordan, from Kuwait, all educated to PhDs, also perfect English. There's no reason to pull these people out other than the fact that they look different, that they wear slightly different clothing sometimes.
Interesting stuff. Let's bring in Fodase from Barcelona, who I think is on the line. Good evening.
Hello?
Oh, you're on Skype, actually. Hello, good to see you. We can't actually see you, but I think people at home can, which is great. What are your thoughts on this issue?
I think it's very very political. I don't know which favor. This is like, but I think I heard about this story like not a long time ago. I think it's already been mentioned by you and also the others. But I think like it's like a double standard when people you say that there is a democracy and a freedom and so on, yet you reject when the idea of other people's lifestyle, when you don't find that maybe it's very different than what you expected. And I don't know if you see it from the freedom of religion. Do you see this is it's kind of like you disrespect the freedom of religion itself as a whole, or maybe based on European Convention? I don't know. How do you see it from here?
Yeah, it's an interesting point, that, isn't it, actually, Morten, that, you know, democracy is, yes, about protecting the rights of minorities, but it is also, to a degree, allowing the will of the majority to happen. And you know what? If there was a poll in France, they might well support this.
That's why I'm against referendums. I guess this should be this. The Brits could learn something. Yeah. Well, but you're pointing. You made a point here. I mean, of course, this is a paradox or dilemma, whatever you call it. I mean, since we are trying to protect minorities, and I guess that we all here could agree that, to some extent, this is also the weight that we weight some member states on, because if you're able to protect minorities, you're looked at as a great democracy, as a great society. But what we're looking at is basically these member states, these nations, trying to protect the majority. Because the majority being at 52%, being at 52%.
Where I come from, we used to start, we would go into university and you'd count the number of Catholics, the number of Protestants on the list to see from Belfast. And the majority governed in a certain way, which impinged upon the rights of the Catholic minority for a long time as well. That was largely corrected by insisting on the rights of the minority to be protected. Now, all rights are protected. You need the government to step in and to protect the rights of everyone.
But actually, there has been many cases, France and Turkey, the two countries that have been at the European Court of Human Rights over this issue, and the courts have, I think, on all occasions ruled in favour of France and said that, you know, the state has the right to protect the culture, which is, I suppose, one of laïcité and secularism. But that doesn't mean it's not fair on those who are inhibited.
No, and you know, it is an ongoing discussion, and it's not something that's just confined to Islam. It's about the rights of individuals versus that of the majority, and about the ability of the state to have influence. Carry on, Morten.
Yeah, and the right on the labour market. We have a huge discussion about. I mean, as late as 2 days ago, I was in a debate in Denmark where people took this issue up and said, well, this crazy, these crazy decisions made by the European Court. I mean, about the labour market, about the rights of a few, and then suddenly we have people running around getting the same rights as things. You know, this is a very popular stand, and this is going to inflect our election campaigns.
Which is coming up in just a couple of months' time. Gentlemen, thank you very much. It's time now for the last words. I'm going to give tonight to Sybil Cullis, who has tweeted in saying, I wonder when people will just let women dress how they want and stop telling them to put more or fewer clothes on. What we wear and what we believe in should be of no concern to others, especially when it's harmless. Let's leave it on that point. Unsurprisingly, we didn't get on to job security. And
we might get on to North Korea tomorrow night, though.
Well, North Korea, because the summit does carry on tomorrow. The debate continues online, #RawPolitics. But for tonight, from Shona, myself, and our guests.
See you tomorrow.
Good night, thanks for watching, and goodbye.